Game changers, game changers. Welcome back to At the Desk with Dr. KwA, where leadership, learning, and lived experience come together to examine the issues shaping our schools and communities. Don't forget, this is a podcast where transformation begins with conversation. Today, we're taking a close look at the changing landscape of teaching profession. Who is entering the profession today? How prepared are they for the realities of the classroom? How are educators navigating technology and artificial intelligence? And how are cultural competence and national policy shifts influencing what happens in schools? Joining me today at the desk is Dr. Reginald Davenport, an accomplished educational and organizational leader with more than 2 decades of experience advancing equity, leadership development, and community impact across education, healthcare, and faith-based institutions. Currently serving as Opportunity, Belonging, and Impact Coordinator at Hackensack Meridian Health, Dr. Davenport has also served as a principal, district supervisor, equity director, consultant, and mentor, guiding leaders and organizations through meaningful change. Dr. Davenport, thank you for pulling up a seat at the desk.
Dr. Qual, thank you for the invitation to the desk. You know, all the luminaries that have sat here before me. Because I had to question my worthiness to sit at the
Whatever,
desk.
man. Come on, brother. You know you are more than worthy. You are more than
I
worthy.
had to put on a bow tie and everything for the
Listen,
desk. You know,
looking spiffy, man. As the old folks would say, looking
try,
spiffy.
hey, I'm just trying to keep up with you, brother.
Listen, you see how casual my behind is.
Yeah, but you got the brand. When I grow up, I'm not gonna
Listen,
have my name.
man.
I'm gonna have
Listen,
my name on
listen,
my shirt.
listen,
Now, hold on, let
listen.
me get a Sharpie. Let me get
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. All right. Look, today we are going to look at the teaching landscape and what it's
Absolutely.
looking like, feeling like, sounding like, and all of the elements that goes into it. Let's
Mhm.
start looking at the workforce itself. Many school leaders say that the profession looks vastly different from what it did when they first entered. From your perspective, who's coming into the profession today?
Well, it's a mixed bag. We automatically assume that they're young college graduates who are coming right out of school into the classroom, but that's not always the case.
Mm,
For as one of the things that I'm also doing is serving as a supervisor for student teachers, and um, both of my students this past semester were not 22 years old coming out of school.
wow. Wow.
One, they were both shifting professions.
Mm-hmm.
One was in her late 50s, early 60s, um, studying to become a kindergarten teacher, and she was quite sincere about feeling that this was a
Wow.
calling, right? It was a gift.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a lot of
Okay.
energy you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
to have to harness because the classroom I observed her in, there was I believe there was 17, 18 students.
Ooh. Oof.
Um, some of those students, the English was not their first language,
Wow.
and so there was a certain energy that she had to match, you know,
Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
and bring it. So and so I think about it as I think about it. I was changed in profession when I became an
Mm.
educator myself. I had worked at the post office for 10 years and had a conversation with a gentleman who is gone now, with the late John Walker. He asked me a simple question. He's like,
Hmm.
you ever thought about teaching? We need
Wow.
more black men in classrooms. And so in that conversation, that was like in the November. I'm not going to say which year, but it does have a 19 in front of it. Um, but that
Ah.
was November, and I had been going through and praying and asking God for some guidance on that. And in January, I was back in school to finish my degree. You know,
Wow.
um,
Wow.
and so by the time I started teaching, I had already reached 30 years old. So
Whew. Okay. Okay. So you were more mature than the average 22-year-old just stepping off of a college campus to. venture
I was
into this
older. I
field?
don't know about mature. I was older,
Okay,
but I don't know
okay.
about mature.
I will pretend I didn't hear that at all. But
Yeah,
you know,
no,
you
there was more life experience. I was already married, and my wife and I had our home, and our daughter was here, and
wow,
it, you
wow.
know, life had been moving forward, and so I had a different set of concerns in my
Mm,
personal life than
right.
I did, because now I got a child to provide for and a household to contribute to, and things like
Wow.
that.
So you're talking about changing motivations for entering the teaching field, right? Career
Hmm.
mobility versus lifelong profession. You mentioned, the need for black males in the educational system. So now we also have to kind of take into account diversity in the education pipeline, right?
Right.
But based on some of the work that you are doing with incoming folks into the profession, you talk about people who have coming into it with different life experiences and have had that other life, right? So
Hmm.
oftentimes it's a career change, but folks coming in, you said something about this kindergarten, soon to be kindergarten practitioner, you know, uh, stating that this is a calling for her, right? So,
Right.
and just thinking about that, do you think today's emerging educators view teaching as a calling, a career step, or something entirely different?
You know, that's an interesting question. I think the importance and the power that educators bring to a classroom
Mm-hmm.
is still considered a calling,
Okay.
right? Um, I think you know there's an unfortunate piece of our society, and there are organizations that will drop teachers into urban districts, and they'll be there for
A
being
hot second.
mindful of not using names,
Right,
um,
right.
that that and while they are well intended, you and I know that it takes a while to really get your chops
Oh,
in teaching,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely,
And
yeah.
I know for me, even though I was older, I didn't really feel like I knew how to teach, and until I was into year 4 or 5. And so now,
Mm,
if our students constantly have to have somebody dropped into their classroom who stays for 1 or 2 years and bring these wonderful flowery programs, and
yeah,
then leave and those programs aren't sustained, you know what happens. And
yes,
and so
yes.
these students are constantly dealing with new teachers, right? New to the profession, new to
Mhm,
pedagogy, new to lesson instructional design and planning, and things like that. So I think those who are going into it, okay, and they're not staying, right? So
right,
I think
right,
those who are going through the student teaching and all those other things, all those other hoops that you have to jump through, I think it is a calling. Now, what that I think a calling for you and I when we were entered maybe
mhm,
may look different,
absolutely.
because I think now we're talking about a generation. Well, now we're talking about Generation Z, right?
Mhm,
And Gen Z, and I don't want to belittle them or anything like that, but they're looking for other things in leadership and a work-life balance, that where we were just, well, if I gotta stay till 4, I gotta stay till 4,
oh,
and
we
and,
we
and
we
we just
wanted
put our nose to
stability
the grind.
too, though, right? We wanted
Right,
stability, and
right.
teaching was a good job. Teaching was a
Te-
real good
Teaching was a
job.
good job with good
Good
benefits, right?
benefits, right? Gen Z will
And
be
all
in
you
there
gotta
for
do is
5
hold on.
minutes. They'll
Hmm.
be in there for 5 minutes and go, "Yeah, yeah, I think I'm done tomorrow."
Yep, yep.
I'll give you some. I'll be the ones that are nice will give you some notification in advance, versus the ones who come in and go, "Oh, I didn't realize the classroom could be this nutty." Uh, Deuces.
Exactly. Exactly. So, it is a calling for those who are committed to the craft.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I think, as instructional leaders, we need to know who's coming in, right? And
Absolutely.
how do we how do we support them and without babying them? I'm
Oh, no, no, no,
still
no.
not
We cannot do that. That's not
right.
in my nature. So that look,
Yeah,
I'll put
well,
it
yeah,
out there.
I remember it when
Babysitting is not my forte.
you know,
But
hey,
but you
exactly.
know what though? I think as we have, we make light of it because we have to
Mhm.
do that to maintain our sanity. And for those in the
Right.
field, I'm sure you understand, right? So the desire
Mhm.
for impact but resistance to outdated systems, right? Those
Right.
are some of the
Right.
things that comes into the equation when you talk
Right.
about the reasons why your Gen Zs are not sticking around more than 10, 15 minutes, right? I
Mhm.
think one of our conversations we had, I talked about the fact that, going into the profession and staying 15, 20, 30 years, longevity, I think is done from my lens because of what I've been
Mhm.
seeing or what I was seeing prior to exiting into retirement. I don't see today's youth coming into the field and staying for 30 years because the dynamics have shifted so drastically, so
Mhm.
drastically. um
Now,
and
so
and
when you're talking about the dynamics, are you talking about the student population or what's
oh,
happening
it's,
on
it's it's a
the federal
combination of
level? Right.
all the above. Student population is vastly different. um Parents are vastly different, right? You chuckle because you know what I'm talking about, right? When we were in the classrooms teaching, right, what we
Mhm.
said carry weight.
Right.
Today is the reverse. The kid goes home and tells mom, the teacher said such and such, or I got a D. Forget the fact that the child didn't do the work that needed to be done, but parent wants to know why you gave their child a D.
Mhm.
Right?
Right.
Man,
Right.
have you looked at all the communication that talks about Kwame not doing all A, B, C, and D, and he's just playing around and goofing off and being silly and just disrupting the class? That's
Mhm.
irrelevant. You have parents coming in, guns blazing, ready to get at the teacher, the administration, and anybody else who's in their path. Right. So the
Right.
dynamics
Right.
have changed, and it makes the field that much more challenging. And then you also have to,
Mhm.
the pylon, right? And so,
Right.
and as we're having that conversation and talking about that, you know, teacher preparation, classroom readiness, right? One
Mhm.
of the concerns that a lot of administrators uh, complain about is teacher readiness. Some say new educators are entering the classroom without the level of preparation that previous generations received. Right. So,
Right.
since you are working directly with some of these folks, what are some of the things that you're seeing and noticing in your pre-service support role?
It's it's interesting because they are I think there is a swath of the population that is not getting a good grounding
Mm,
in classroom management, right? And
critical,
it doesn't mean
critical, critical.
right, and it doesn't mean that you're walking around with a big stick, right? And the children are sitting in rows, and everybody's, but when a child is disruptive, it is because they are bored or they don't get it, and they don't want you to know that they don't get it, and so
Exactly.
they're gonna make people laugh, or they're gonna bother somebody or things like that, and
Hmm.
how do you, and I think in my role as a student teacher supervisor, I'm not seeing the instructional piece that they're getting, right? I'm
Mm,
actually observing them in classrooms. And
okay.
so it is my hope that real time is taken, real coursework, real space is given to those entering education to understand how to de-escalate things. That
Hmm.
just because the child is challenging you, it doesn't mean that it's you personally. It means that they don't get it, or they're scared, or
Right.
or something else could be the issue. And I'm not saying that you got to baby them and and say, oh, Reggie, it's okay, life is hard sometimes, but sometimes you got to be able to understand that, or there is a world outside of your classroom that is
Mm-hmm.
impacting that child within your classroom in some capacity.
Right.
Mom and dad were fighting last night. Dad left.
Mm.
You
Mm-hmm.
know, it could be all kinds of things. Um, so that impacts how that child shows up. And I think we look at classroom management that involves cultural competence and understanding the community that you in which that you are connected in. Not
Mm-hmm.
everybody is in your Bergen counties, and not
No.
everybody is working in
Your
in
Westfields
some of these other
and
districts, right?
your
It's,
Mawas and all of those other locations that right.
exactly, exactly. Um, and so, I think making sure that those teachers are well grounded in classroom management and what that looks like, and sometimes that classroom management is just the differentiation in the instruction. So
Mm-hmm.
you meeting those students' needs. But when the students are allowed to be disruptive and that's not addressed, they're internalizing that like, oh, I can do whatever I
I
want
could
to.
do this all day. But I think
Hmm.
the placebo to that management dynamic is that one thing that we've talked about time and again: relationships,
There you go.
relationships, right? You mentioned
Right.
cultural competency,
Hmm.
understanding where you're working and who you're working with, right?
Absolutely.
um Making it a point to be vested in that environment to get a better understanding so that you will be better able to connect with those scholars that are sitting before you and get them to do
Mhm.
what you need them to do so that they're not constantly disrupting your learning environment. But
That's right.
I think you mentioned it. If we're being honest, many teachers historically learned on the job. But are we
Yeah.
doing enough today to support novice educators once they arrive? Right? Because I think that's the second part of this. I know for a fact my training ground really was my per diem days back when they used to have building based substitutes. Right? I ended up
Mm.
covering for a practitioner who had gotten hurt on his second job. So I, in essence, for like a 6 month period, was a math teacher. So it was in those days, that I kind of honed my okay, what to do, what not to do. That didn't go so well,
Right,
Yeah, we
right,
won't
right,
try that tactic again. So it's those things. But once we get these practitioners in our buildings, what can be done to support these individuals so that they we accelerate the learning curve and the process for them to be able effectively manage those instructional settings and meet our scholars where they are.
right. In corporate, it's called the continuous improvement loop, right? And you're constantly, we need to make sure that our teachers are willing to receive feedback
Mm,
and understand that
that's a
feedback is
critical.
not
that's
personal.
that's a tough one. That's a
Yeah,
tough
yeah,
one.
yeah,
I
because
just I I just did a difficult conversation training, and
hmm
I was telling the folks, when you have your post conference and you used to tell somebody they got a 2 out of 4, they don't hear nothing
hmm
else you got to say. What do you mean
the
I'm a
yeah,
2? Like they take offense to it versus listening to the reasons why it's a 2 and what can be done to improve that. Move
right.
that 2 to a 3 to a 4. But yeah,
hmm
yeah, feedback is whew.
Being able to receive that feedback
Mhm.
but for as a leader, making sure that feedback is actionable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
It's not just, that really sucked,
Go fix
but
it.
it's like, hey, you may not have noticed, but Reggie was doing A, B, and C, and this is why, or this
Mhm.
may be why. Maybe you should look into this, or um, and I think, having that iterative conversation about, hey,
Mhm.
all right, that didn't go well, or that sandwich, right? This went well, this didn't go so well, but you did this well,
Right.
right?
Right.
But being able to really kind of hone in and then come back and give that teacher another opportunity, because we want our students to come out of schools after graduating high school with the growth mindset. But are
Absolutely.
we supporting the growth mindset of our educators? That's and
Hmm.
that's and
That's a good
important,
question. That's
because
a good question.
how are they going to grow and be better? Because you got to know that you're coming into this situation not knowing everything, right? And
Right.
so how
Well,
am I going to
some
help
of
you to
these
be?
kids, they
Yeah,
their
yeah.
self
Come
their,
on
their
now.
sense
I'm
of
trying to
their
give them the
sense of
credit.
their
Trying to give
sense
them the
of
benefit of the doubt.
entitlement. I hear you, but they come in with this sense of entitlement, thinking that I already know this and I already know that, until, like I said, the classroom reality goes pop, and then it's like, oh. But
Mm-hmm.
with respect to these, you know, helping through feedback, right? I
Right.
also think that it's critically important that schools establish some induction programs, right? Some coaching models that can help these, especially those novice practitioners who don't have anything other than this is their first real job, right?
Right. Right.
And because I think those of us who came via alternate route haven't
Mm-hmm.
done something else, like you said, you spent 10 years working. So you walked
Mm-hmm.
into the profession with a degree of understanding. You may not have had all the nuts and bolts of, dealing with 25 kids in front of you with different personalities and all of those things, but you at least came in with a balance, some degree of balance, and know how in terms of, okay, if this don't work, I could try that, right? Without panicking too quickly. Um,
Right. Right.
So I think that.
It was interesting. My first role was in an urban district in Essex County.
Oh,
Um,
that was where I hone my chops, man.
oh
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
it
oh
starts with
yeah.
the first word starts with an E, the second word starts with an O. Um, and there was a program, an alternative ed program.
Hmm.
Um, and these were students who had been pulled out of classrooms who didn't have IEPs, and maybe they should have had IEPs, but did
Yeah.
not. And each class had two certified teachers, and
Mm,
an aide.
really?
And because of the interactions in the hallways, the teachers moved.
Ah,
Students did
okay.
not move.
Yeah.
And this is the environment I'm cutting my chops on, right? And here I'm, 30 years old. I'm like, yeah, education, it's gonna change your life, and they're like, man, we change your life,
With the quickness, with the
with the cool,
quickness, with the quickness.
but it did, and I'm gonna tell you, in that situation, you know, there there I learned how to control a class.
Mm,
I didn't learn how to teach a class,
okay.
because there was so much energy in just
Hmm,
keeping them in their seats and getting them to do one or two things during a period.
right.
And and the observations or evaluations were rubber stamps. They were rubber
So
stamps.
with that, even, right? So now I'm thinking, professional learning communities, like the
Right.
true essence of what is meant to be, I think needs to be in play. Not
Absolutely.
for folks to get together and be a moan, but really strategize and help support these novice
Oh, absolutely.
practitioners, with getting a good understanding of the landscape and how to best uh manage it, as well as in the process of managing also be able to support scholars
Oh,
and meet
absolutely.
them where they are and their needs. And that also, I think, lends itself to seriously, like we said earlier, leadership responsibility, right?
Hmm.
Leaders have to make sure that these things are in play, so that these new novice practitioners coming into the equation can really have some degree of sustained time in the
Right.
building, getting what they need, understanding the landscape, and making the decisions that best support scholars and their growth. And I think that would be a win-win for all, you know.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think, and working with NJPSA, the instructional leaders that I've been blessed to work with,
Hmm.
they were solidly grounded in understanding
Nice.
systems and change, and how to support students, and how important I teachers, especially new teachers, but all
Mm,
teachers need support. And I think it impacted how, like, just the conversations, and
right.
and then thinking back on, you know the decisions I made when I was a principal, right? And
Right.
what did I do? Ooh, could I have done that a little better? Now, yeah, now we're talking some time down the road,
Right.
but it is always, I think we as leaders, um there's a spotlight on us. Matter of fact,
Always.
there was a conversation I had when I was at Maxon in Plainfield,
Uh-huh.
and
You're naming names again, but it's all good. Go ahead. Go
yeah, that's all right,
ahead.
that's all right, because this is a positive one.
It's a positive
You
one. We'll
know,
take it. We'll take it.
yeah, yeah, this is a positive one. But there was a professional developer in there working with my ELA teachers, and
Hmm.
she wanted to have a conversation, kind of debrief me on the session.
Right.
And one of the things that she said as we sat down was that, you know and I really appreciate your time. It's, because I know sometimes it's kind of tough as
Hmm.
the principal, and it wasn't until that moment that I realized, of all the humans in that building, right? There's many
Hmm.
teachers. There's more than one assistant principal. There's lots of
Mm.
students. There's custodians. There's security. There's all these people, but there's still only one principal.
Yep.
You know,
Yep.
and you're walking down the hall, and you got five things going on in your head
Listen.
that you have to take care of or address, and no one knows what you're bringing to the table, because you're the only sometimes you're not even seen.
Oh no.
One of
Not
one of
listen.
the things Yeah, but one of the things that you said about is the relationships.
Hmm.
I figured out a couple of spots in the school where everybody passes.
Mm.
So, it's like by the gym, by the cafeteria,
Right.
and so
Right.
I made sure that I always spent some time in those spots,
No doubt. No doubt.
speaking to kids, laughing with kids, talking to kids. So it was building those relationships and making sure teachers saw me there,
Yep.
you know,
That
because
visibility is critical too.
absolutely. And then getting into a classroom without it being an evaluation.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
I'm here to
Yes.
support you. I just want to be around some good instruction. That kind of
That's
thing.
it.
So,
That's it.
so the
And
relationship.
and and
Ultimately, there is no education without the humans, right? And
oh,
so, and there's no education without the relationship.
absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, you hit it on the head when you talk about the fact that all of these entities in this building, the weight of whatever happens in that space, good, bad, and different, is yours
Hmm.
to bear. Right? You are
Yep.
the first line of defense, the last line of defense. You are just the defense, right? Uh, and and
Absolutely.
and and
I got
and,
the scars to show it too.
right, and you need a different level of skin to
Hmm.
really
Oh,
sit in that
absolutely.
chair, and you got to check your emotions and not let it get the best of you in situations where you want to go south, so yeah. But let's move on a little bit.
Yeah,
We
yeah.
talked about the classroom dynamics and the need for relationships, but we also now have to talk about modern classrooms, right? Technology, AI. Now,
Mhm.
the technology that was kind of in vogue when I was still teaching, graphing calculators and calculators. It
Ooh.
was like, ooh, Like
Yeah, I still
we
have
you
one.
know we were rolling, you know.
Hmm.
We didn't have
Absolutely.
all of these supplemental elements to infuse into our lessons and all of that stuff. So now, by the time I left as an admin, technology was a heavy part of the curriculum. And, practitioners were expected to not only know it, but effectively put it to use in enhancing what they did.
Right. Right.
Technology has always influenced education, but
Hmm.
artificial intelligence is also introducing an entirely new dimension. From your lens, how prepared are teachers to integrate technology and now AI into their instructional practice?
That's a tough question, right? Because if you're looking at solely at the Gen Z population, right?
Mm-hmm.
They don't know a world without the internet,
Mm.
right? They don't
Yes.
they don't know a world without being able to get all the answers that you think you have
Click of a
on your
button,
phone.
baby. Click of a
Right,
button.
right. Right. But, what life experience gives you is often, not always, but but
Should give you.
life experience will give you the maturity of discernment,
Mm.
that
Yes.
comes, or discernment that comes with maturity, and understand what good instruction is, or what good information is, and things like that, and being able to check resources and sources. I think it's interesting as I get more and more into using AI,
Mm.
um, the things that come up, like, and then I'm like, wow, I'd have never thought of that, right?
Right.
Because it's
Mm-hmm.
it's searching through all of these sources. But is
You gotta be
if
careful.
a child puts in if a chi yeah, exactly. If a student puts in a question about, the American Revolution,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it spits out all this information. What is to stop that student from cut and pasting, right?
Mm-hmm.
Depending on what tool you're using, you can
Right.
just put it right into a Word doc, right? Or a Google Doc, or
Right.
or something like that. you know, are they learning?
Mm.
Isn't that the
That's a
same
good
thing as
question.
me
That's a
sitting?
good question.
Isn't that the same thing as me sitting there in sixth grade doing a book report on sharks and copying word from word from the encyclopedia? Remember that thing called the encyclopedia?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Those thick old joints, right? Those thick
Right,
books.
right. But
Yeah, I think we
what
had
did I
every.
learn? I mean, I'm still hopped up about Shark Week when that comes on each year, but that's, that's but and so I think, teacher preparation programs need to
Mm.
really take a deep look at how AI is impacting classrooms, and infusing that into instruction. We've
The,
always, as you said, we've always had computers,
mm-hmm.
right? Or some kind of technology,
Right,
right? But
right.
I find myself disappointed when I'm observing a student teacher, and they have a smart board, and they're just
And
using it as,
it
as a
it it,
glorified
it collects it collects
chalkboard.
dust.
Yeah,
It
no, it's
collects
on,
dust, or it does
and
is
they're
it just
writing on
right,
it,
right. It's a
but
board,
they're
right? We
not
just use it as a new board.
right. They're just using it as a glorified chalkboard, right?
Wow,
And
wow.
or a video screen, right?
So Davenport, like the thing that I'm finding to be fascinating, right? I think
Hmm.
the technology is coming at 100 miles an
Yeah,
hour,
it's always
right?
changing.
And the
Yeah,
field is still trying to figure out the last iteration of whatever came out. And so
right.
now we're doing this flying the plane and building it simultaneously because AI's arrival kind of took everybody, universities
Right.
and all, by
Good.
storm, right? And
Sure.
kind of
Right.
like, okay, we don't have policies to govern how this thing is going to be infused into this field. You had universities trying to figure out, well, can they use it? Don't use it. Do we give them credit for it? And just like everybody's kind of like chasing the cat, so to speak, right? Or
Right.
the joker's out the barnyard and we're trying to catch up to it. And it's like, whoa,
Right.
okay, well, let's write a policy that okay, they can use it, but they can't do this, right? They can do and it's crazy. It's crazy. So would you consider AI as an instructional tool or as a shortcut? Right. You asked the question before, am I still learning if I put in my prompt and it spits this out and I copy and paste and just, hey, I'm done. It would have taken me 10 hours to do this in the past, but 15, hell, 5 minutes. I'm done. I got a nice cover for you, and here you go.
As you were you were speaking, I'm like, wow. What if this was around when we were writing our dissertations?
Stop the press.
It's just this. It's
See,
just
you're about to
rhetorical.
start. You're
You
about
don't
you're
have to.
about to get me started, man. Come on. Come on. Come
It's
on.
you don't have to answer it. It's just
No, I
a
look,
what
I'm
if.
not
Like,
I'm not going
hmm,
to answer it. It's just I'm upset that you even brought it up because man, I was supposed to be done in 14. You know when I finished 23. That's a 9-year differential, man. If I had known about this, I'd have been sitting in somebody's cafe like, yes, and yep, and this and yep, and but
mm,
I don't know that I would
right.
have gotten the same bang for the buck, right? It would have
That's
been
right.
done,
That's right.
but would I have been able to really talk and speak to my research, right?
Right.
And I think there's
Right.
something to be said about, putting a little
So,
sweat into the work that you're doing so that,
hmm.
when it's all said and done, you can feel good about, yeah, I did that. I did that.
Right. Right.
I get the e-repository reports on how many people have like, downloaded my work and I'm going, wow, and so
Hmm.
yeah, I'm glad I finished my joint before all of this really came into the equation because, you know, you don't know the pride, there's a degree of pride that I feel when I get the notification that another person has downloaded your work. Another person,
Oh yeah.
right?
Yeah. I know
Because
that feel.
it's like, yo, okay, I put in the work and it's being acknowledged or recognized by other people, just as I did for other people when I had to do my
Right.
lit review and you had to do for your lit review and things like that.
Right.
So yeah,
Right.
yeah, but
Yeah.
nah,
Right. So, but
real
here,
talk,
so wait.
I wouldn't have wanted this when I was really
Right.
in the thick of things, man. Nah.
Right. So, so here, I guess to answer your question, is can it be, is it an instructional tool? It can be
Absolutely.
if the learner can speak to that information. All
Okay.
right, because
Okay.
it can be a shortcut. Because instead of spending 10 hours gathering all these resources, all right, here you have a tool that can gather
Mm-hmm.
these resources. All right, but are you now going through that information and diving in
Vet it.
in
Vet
a
it.
in a in a way
Vet it.
and vet that
Because
information?
AI will give you some okey doke stuff if you're not careful.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and tell you're wrong when you say no, that's
Mm-hmm.
not right. Um, but I think that goes back to when we first entered in, or even when we were instructional leaders, and there was this big laptop rollout, right?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Look, we
Oh,
were we were
everybody's
moving,
gonna get
boy.
a tablet, and
Yeah.
I'm like, oh boy, you know, and you have teachers
But do you
who,
realize how late that was in our careers though? Like when the
yeah,
laptops and all of that started popping up on the scene, I
hmm,
was actually an admin by then. I was no longer in the
right,
classroom. Like when I was in the classroom, jeez, by the what was the first? I can't even remember what the first. Like I said, graphing calculators. That was like, shoot, we've arrived, man. You laughing, bro? I'm telling you that
hey,
was.
I
Look,
remember having four big desktops in the back of my
mm,
classroom.
now the
You know,
desktops, yes, that was a thing too. Because once those came
right,
into the equation, it was like, ooh, and each class had about two. If you were lucky and you were able to pull it off, you got three. and the
Hmm.
kids will work on there, in
Right.
rotation, right? Now
Oh,
you talk
absolutely.
about everybody got their own device, and half of
Hmm.
these jokers don't even appreciate it. Ugh. Anyway, so
Right,
so
right.
it,
But even then, you still had to be mindful of what they were printing out because you know, if you know Reggie's been failing his spelling test all year long, and now all of a sudden he's using 5-syllable words.
hey, hey, hey,
You
hey,
know,
you gotta be like
you got to
Reggie,
raise an
Reggie,
eyebrow,
Reggie, you
and
the
if you
man.
if you're not noticing that, then what are you doing, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. But I think with the advent of AI and technology, do you think it's time for us to reimagine the teaching role?
Um, I think it might be prime time to do that, right?
Okay.
What is are are we facilitators of learning,
Mm,
right? Yeah, is you know there are and we spoke about this earlier, right? The need for human contact
absolutely.
and humans learning from humans, right? There is a vested interest when that the child brings when they know there's a vested interest in his or her well-being and her educational, social, emotional well-being by
Mm-hmm.
this human who is
Right.
in charge of this classroom.
Right. Right.
And I think that cannot be uh, um,
Overlooked.
undervalued,
Nope.
overvalued, or undervalued, really.
Right.
Hmm?
Right. And I
You know,
and you know what? As you're saying that, I'm going, wow. You know what? We fundamentally are community based. We're communal, right? And I think
absolutely,
it's critically
absolutely.
important, and so, one of my big concerns is that with technology, we are beginning to operate in silos. I don't know if it's just me seeing it, but I know at some point, you know, when my son was coming up, with all of him and his friends having these phones and all of this stuff, and they'll talk about having a play date. Okay, y'all in the play date back in the day. Play date means that we running around talking to each other, and these
Yeah, I
jokers are,
bet.
yeah, these jokers are sitting there all on their phones, head down, and I'm like,
Mhm.
so you guys just don't you get together and you don't want to talk? We are talking. What do you mean we're talking? You are literally sitting next to each other, texting each other. What is that? What is
That
that?
that All right. So whose fault is that? Right? Is
Well,
you
I
know
I take a little bit of that.
No,
You know
and I
what?
do too.
I should have known. I should have known better. But again, but so my son is now what, 24, and so we're talking. I'm going to go at least 14 years back, right, when
Right,
he was
right,
about 10. So you talking 10 years ago, and
right,
and it's like, wow, now the generations that came after him, they're on some other level with that technology. They can't even be separated from it because they're so attached. They're so
right. Well,
attached.
see, I you know I and I hate to generalize,
Hmm.
but here it goes anyway. I
Oh, why
I
not
think
generalize?
I think we have a generation of parents, or we have some parents in this generation, because I don't
Hmm.
want to,
Oh, that's
you
a
know,
better way to phrase it. Some, right?
right, right,
Yeah.
that have allowed the the iPads, the phones to be binkies, right? Just going
Yes.
to keep my child
Quiet.
occupied and out of my hair
Yep.
and
Yep.
quiet, because it's hard work to
Being
engage
a
a
parent.
child, and that's a lot of
Being a
energy,
parent, and
to
so
raise a
look,
child.
why do you think they love sending them to us as classroom teachers? What? Yeah, what
I
you mean
know.
y'all
A
are,
snow
wait,
day,
school's closed.
it's only
Snow
six
day.
inches. Get them kids in school.
Just think back to COVID. Those jokers were like, "Yeah, when y'all gonna open this school thing back up? You want me to spend all
You
this time
know?
with my baby? Yes, ma'am. You spend some quality time."
It's your turn. Now you see what we're dealing with.
Oh man. So, transitioning from the newness of the classroom space that we mentioned you mentioned earlier, you and I both talked about the cultural competence and inclusive education, right? That's a major conversation in education centered on cultural competence and inclusive practices. You spent much of your career focused on equity and belonging. How do you see this work evolving in schools today?
And I think if we're to be honest about, and and make a generalization about Gen Zs,
Mhm.
Gen Z do have a bigger commitment to working in an area in which they feel they can be their authentic selves, right?
That
And
I will give them. Yep.
and so that, so when you even talk about what their passion is, or why, their why, right? What is their
Mhm.
north star, right? And who they are. I remember, as I don't have any tattoos, but I know when I was a kid, if somebody had a tattoo on their neck, you was about to die, because that was a person who was dangerous, right?
Right, right,
but
right.
but
They stay away from those people.
you stay away from that. But it's not that way anymore, right?
No,
I I
no, not at
think
all.
I I think when we start talking about what the calling is, right? It is connected to their purpose, and their social justice views, and
Mhm.
how they are allowed to be authentic. And so the belonging, I think, is even more important to this generation than previous generations.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so
I can
the
see
the
that.
the
I
the
see that.
the thing for us as instructional leaders is, how do we make sure that they feel they belong in the school, in classrooms, and how are they providing that same kind of welcome spirit and welcome space for students who are coming with all kinds of mental health things, and things
Mhm.
like that.
Mhm. Mhm. And so even when you say that, right? I'm hearing you talk about allowing these new practitioners, novice practitioners to be their authentic selves, but then navigating that political tension, right, around the authenticity of individuals factors in. And one would think the educational space should be Switzerland, right? A neutral setting where be
Hmm.
you, embrace this, embrace that. But that's not necessarily the case, right? We find ourselves constantly at it,
Right,
and so, cultural responsiveness and representation and teaching and all, right? Ho- this is something that really, I think needs a little bit more oomph.
right,
But I think I just feel that the dynamics of politics have reared this ugly claws into the field and
right.
is slowly polluting and eroding some of the beautiful aspects of the field. That's just my 2 cents on that. But yeah, yeah.
Well, see, I think uh, what has happened over the past few years is that, when you tell the lie enough, it becomes the truth.
Mm,
So when you start denying the true history of any people or any marginalized group,
right.
and allowing that infection to grow unchecked, without any antibiotic of
Ah,
of of
none
of
at
truth,
all.
right?
Yep.
It becomes, the politics have impacted schools and policies in a way that we dare not use the acronym DEI anymore, right?
When you say that, right, and some educators feel uncertain about how to approach these topics today, right? Because
Hmm.
it's like the third rail. You touch
Right.
it, God only knows what's going to happen. What guidance will you offer school leaders trying to maintain an inclusive environment?
Duck. No. It's like I know a good bourbon.
Yeah,
No.
yeah.
I think, ultimately school leaders are also the protector of the people, right? In
Hmm.
that school. Um, and there are a there's a broad spectrum of political views because just because you're an educator doesn't necessarily mean that you don't think the political views of those in charge now. It doesn't mean that you don't think they're right,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And so I fear for the emotional safety of educators in that space. I fear for the emotional safety of students in that space. But for those who truly are concerned about the education of young people and that we are truly preparing them to be successful in a world that doesn't even exist yet.
Mm.
um, the world is only getting browner, the
Oh,
world is
without a
only
doubt.
getting more diverse.
Without a
And
doubt.
so, how do we prepare them to be successful in that world?
And I
You
think
know?
that's also part of the fight. And I think that this is a perfect, I think, segue for us because I wanted us to kind of look at federal policy and the change in educational landscape, right?
Hmm.
Education has always been influenced by policy decisions at the federal level. With the ongoing shifts we're seeing nationally, what changes do you think educators should be paying attention to?
Um, wow, there's so
So
many.
so right
Um,
because
there,
here's
you
one
look at,
I was going to share. I was going to say, policy influence on curriculum and instruction. Right.
there you
I
go.
think that's one of the big things because you mentioned the fact that globally, the look of the planet is becoming a lot browner than one wishes it to be, or some
Hmm.
wish it to be. But on this in this hemisphere, right, the policies that are in place are influencing curriculum. It's influencing what instruction is going to look like, right? They've
Hmm.
attached funding priorities to
Yeah.
these policies. Um, those of us who do not adhere to it or jump in with both feet, right? They've
Hmm.
made sure that there are accountability structures in place
Right.
to deny you some funding, take away
Hmm.
funding, right? All so the political polarization around education, I think, is one of those things that gives me pause, especially in these current times,
Right.
right? So these policies, right? What should we pay attention to? What should leaders who are still grinding it out and showing up every day to support practitioners and in turn support scholars? What if it's one
I mean,
thing?
we still have to engage. It's like, all right, so you want to cut the funding. All right, so what am I going to use these resources for? Right
Hmm.
now, we talked about AI, right?
Right.
While mistakes may happen in AI, you ask a question about the history of Black History Month, or uh, Latino history in the or the Native Americans
Hmm.
in this country. That truth is still going to come out.
Right.
right? That truth is
Right.
still going to be stated. I think um, it is important that instructional leaders engage the community
Okay.
to make sure that they are aware of what what the intention is. You know, I'm here to educate your children or ensure that your children are educated, you
Right.
know, and just because there is a political environment that says that that Black history shouldn't be taught or African American studies is not should not be taught does
Mm-hmm.
not mean that there is not Black history. Does not mean that it has not highly impacted the growth of this country.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so there's going to take a certain amount of courage. There's going to take a certain amount of understanding that there's going to be pushback, right? Even with wherever your community, because it wasn't only God's lighter children that voted for this administration.
Oh no, not at all. Not at all.
Yeah, no.
Not at all.
So let's be honest here,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
You
I
know,
mean, that's where
we
you
we
say
we
we're complicit in the process as well,
we
right?
yeah, there has been some complicity within every even in, every blue state didn't vote only blue,
No
right?
doubt. No doubt.
You know,
No doubt. Yep.
so
Yep.
it's an understanding that truth needs to be told because we are in the our job is to ensure children are prepared to be successful,
Absolutely.
right? And to
Absolutely.
deny history is problematic, right?
Absolutely.
And if you look at it, my wife was overseas for work in Europe, right? And
Mm-hmm.
she did this tour, and her tour guide across the Atlantic Ocean
Hmm.
showed them some things that were happened from Nazi Germany
Hmm.
and made the comparison of what is happening in America and the United States now.
Wow.
You
But we
know,
know we know it's a playbook, right? We know there's a
right,
playbook.
right.
So it's just been dusted off, tweaked a
Well,
little
yeah,
something, something. Or it's in
hmm
some instances not even a tweak. We just going with it as is and see how it
as
lands,
is,
right?
right,
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 right.
right.
You
So
know,
so
and it.
so on go ahead, finish your thought.
Yeah, go ahead, go ahead, go ahead.
Because I was going to ask, so in this environment, how can school leaders remain focused on scholars while navigating these broader political and policy dynamics?
Um, ultimately, we still got to teach them mathematics. Ultimately, we still have to teach them English and what it looks like to be able to read and read well, to be able to
Mm-hmm.
discern what the information is. The policies are trying to limit what they can read. So
Mm-hmm.
even what we have
Right.
access to, there's still a need to be able to utilize those tools to teach them to be good readers, to understand reading, to be able to get answers for themselves through use these AI tools, use these technology tools to be able to find the truths that are out there. I think we still have the charge of making sure that they grow in their ability to discern good
Mm-hmm.
information from the false narratives that are out there. That we are providing spaces for them that they can still be their authentic selves. They have to feel like they belong because once you feel
Absolutely.
like you belong is when you
You
are willing to
thrive.
take risks,
You,
right?
you
You are
and you
willing to
thrive. You take the risk
and you
that
thrive.
lets you thrive. Right.
That lets you thrive.
Yeah.
That's where that growth comes from. So I think it is still being true to knowing what good instruction is and what it looks like. It is
Mm-hmm.
still helping your teachers be the best teachers that they can possibly be, and understand that you can fly under this radar,
Mm-hmm.
And every once in a while you may have to pop your head out, right?
Catch a
But
glimpse.
catch a glimpse, right? Don't put your head in the sand, but
No
make
doubt. No
sure
doubt.
that good instruction is still taking place in your math classes, in your
Yep.
English class, in art, in phys ed, wherever learning is taking place, you still know what good instruction looks like, right?
Absolutely.
Regardless of
Absolutely.
those, regardless of the policies. There are some fights that you cannot fight on the school level,
Mm-mm.
right? There are
Mm-mm.
some
You're
fights
right.
that the district need to fight, right? And you can support that, or you can just stay in your corner, and that's the personal decision that people have to make. But I think if you're going to be an instructional leader,
Mm-hmm.
you have to be an instructional leader, right?
And
And,
that's a heavy
regardless
that's
of
a
the
heavy
policies
that's
that are coming.
a heavy lift.
Right,
It's a
right,
heavy lift. And so
absolutely.
when we talk about leadership, right? And I'm glad you're going into that space, right? Leadership, service, and calling, right? So beyond education and healthcare leadership, you've also served as an ordained minister for over 2 decades, brother.
Yes, sir.
In a minute, I'm about to evoke, hey man, you got 14 jobs, man. or to my one job, what am I, lazy llama being? I only have one.
I'm a lazy lima bean. Yes.
But I'm really curious, how has that spiritual and service oriented lens shaped the way you approach leadership?
It's still the people,
The
right?
people.
In spiritual leadership or pastoral care, while I was never a pastor, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's still serving the people, seeing a need and filling that need. Um, it is about the relationship.
Mm-hmm.
That I now am a part of a large church, but I never believed personally in the mega church because the spiritual leader needs to be able to connect with the people, right?
Right. Right.
My pastor now, she knows everybody by name. She knows their stories, she knows what's going on in their lives, and I think instructional leaders have to do the same thing.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
know, knowing the kids' names, knowing their teachers' names, knowing their stories, knowing what's going on in their lives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was an assistant principal, and we had this student who was just struggling. And now I'm getting to wear my suits every day and things like that, and he was just having the worst day, and he didn't want to talk to anybody, and he's just sitting in the hall, and I'm actually sitting on the floor in my suit. I
Mm-hmm.
wasn't wearing my bow ties yet, but in
Nah,
my
nah,
suit.
no, that's the evolution.
That was the evolution. That came it came later.
Right.
Um, but being able to get down on the floor with them and
Mm-hmm.
and and see them as humans. And so I think there was always a lot of overlap because
Right.
in spirituality and in the church, there's no church or spirituality without the human endeavor, right?
Mm-hmm.
What are we struggling with? What are we feeling that we need a blessing for? What are we connecting to? The same thing in schools. Who are we in our classrooms, and and
Right.
and we as educators, right, we're not leaving our troubles on the seat. We don't pull up into our parking lot or into our parking space and leave who we are or part of who we are
No,
in
no,
our
no,
car.
no. We bring it
all
with
of that
us.
all of that comes with us. Our
Yeah.
biases come with us.
Absolutely.
Our
Absolutely.
struggles come with us,
Right.
and how that impacts how we approach the job. And
And
so
so,
there's always been an overlap for me.
yeah. And so, as I'm hearing you speak on this, the spiritual side of it, uh, not even a side, but being a servant leader, right,
Mhm.
also means being an ethical leader, uh, and taking on community responsibility, mentorship, right? All of these elements that, one can look at from a spiritual lens and servant leadership lens are the same qualities that need to exist within the instructional setting, right?
Absolutely.
With leaders, right? Because you are part of the community of your school. You know, you need to mentor those practitioners who need that some guidance or who needs a little push and what have you. Um, you know, being doing what is right by the people that you are charged with caring
Right.
for, ensuring that they get the best quality education with what you have, right? And so,
Absolutely.
I definitely, you know, appreciate that lens you kind of brought into this conversation. But you know, as we are having this conversation in these times of change, leadership often requires both courage and clarity. And it is my hope that folks who are listening, game changers, if you're tuned in and you're listening, I hope you got that message, man. Courage and clarity in these
Courage and
difficult
clarity.
times. So,
Yeah.
Dr. Davenport, you know, I want to say thank you for joining us, but I can't let you go without hitting our folks with some educator and leader um, advice, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
uh, if you could offer three pieces of advice, I was about to do two, but you know, three pieces of advice,
Yeah. Three.
three.
Hmm.
All right,
All right.
I'll give you your target audience: new teachers entering the profession, right?
Is this three each?
No, 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 no.
Oh,
One for
okay.
new
Oh, okay.
teachers.
Whew.
One for new
I was like,
teachers
that's
entering the
nine.
profession.
I ain't that smart.
No, 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 no. We're not going to torture you like that, right? School leaders guiding their staff and
Hmm.
policymakers shaping education. What would you say, right? Advice for new teachers entering the profession, school leaders guiding their staff, and policymakers shaping education. What would you say, or what would be that advice?
For wow. I think for new teachers entering the profession,
Mm-hmm.
stay true to why you're entering this profession,
Okay.
right? You're this is not a profession where you're going to get rich, right?
I'm sorry, you just made me laugh, but yes, he's not lying. Trust me. Can't
Right,
lie,
right.
can't lie.
This is you're now a baller, right?
Mm-mm, you know.
They stay true to the North Star, right?
mm,
No matter how the world turns, the
mm-hmm.
North Star is always in the same place. And
Okay.
and so if you stay true to the purpose, why are you a teacher? Why are you an educator? There's going to be hard days. There's going to be days when everything you do is absolutely it goes right out the park, and
Mm,
you think you're walking on air.
uh-huh.
But there are going to be days that are really going to be hard. And every day you wake up means that you survived your worst days. You've already survived your worst days.
Nice.
And so as long as you stay true to your the purpose and the calling and know that there is a child who is depending on you to be the
Mm,
best that you can be every day. Stay true to
absolutely.
that purpose.
Absolutely.
Um, School leaders guiding their staff. Um, Understand that you are dealing with a staff of multi-generational individuals who see things differently, who believe things differently, who may have some commonality in their in their purpose for being educators,
Mm-hmm.
but they're coming from it with different life experiences and things like that. Be approachable, be willing to listen and learn and know that they are coming with different experiences that you may not have any experience with. And so while you have the title, you don't know it all. And that you can
Mm,
still and you can model the learning by being a learner as well.
So,
Policy makers.
basically, they should be leading with empathy.
Yes, yes, yes. Policymakers, man, what y'all doing? Policymakers, um, always be willing to ask the question: Is this why? Is this why people elected me?
Mm,
Are these decisions the best decisions for the people as a whole versus because I have a certain set of beliefs, this is the policy that I'm going to support? I think, you know, too many policymakers, whether it's local boards, whether it's township, state, federal, if you are about the politics and not about the people,
hmm
you I think the decisions you make are going to be easily challenged and questioned,
Absolutely.
and often not defensible. So for policymakers, you know, are the decisions that you're making, the issues that you're supporting, best for the people as a whole? And not I get not every decision is going to work for every community,
Right.
but but overall, is it the best possible option for the community that elected you?
Brother Davenport, I couldn't have said
Dr.
that any
KwA,
better. I couldn't have said it any better.
I
Brother, I
appreciate it.
truly appreciate you pulling up a seat at the desk.
I appreciate the invitation.
You have enlightened our audience, game changers. He did his thing, provided some definite insights that we can all chew on. I want to thank you all very much. All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate the
Thank you.
love. Don't go too
Absolutely.
far. Let me just close this out and we will continue on the other side.
All right. Thank you for having me. It was an honor.
Thank you. Game changers. Education is always evolving. New generations of teachers, new technologies, and new policies continually reshape the landscape. But one thing remains constant: the need for thoughtful, courageous leadership that centers scholars, supports educators, and build communities of belonging. Dr. Reginald Davenport, thank you for joining me at the desk and sharing your insights. And to our listeners, game changers, continue leading with purpose, perspective, and possibility. Until our next sit down, I am Dr. KwA. For those of you who don't know what KwA stands for, Dr. Kwame Redu Asante. Until next time, be well. Thank you for joining us.